Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's why, you got to have clarity of what the overall mission is, what is your North Star, and everybody should know that. And I always remind leaders that I believe effective leaders are the CROs, the chief reminding officers. They're living the mission, they're living the values, they're sharing, and they're models of what the behaviors of the core values are, because those are all essential, because culture is built day in and day out. And you can put up a great mission statement, you can put up core values, but if you're not as a leader living them, and then everybody understand what they are, and making sure that you're holding people accountable by praising them when they're doing well and correcting them when they're not. That's essential.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl. Each week, I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Jim Johnson. Over 30 years of experience developing winning high school basketball teams, including 428 career victories, sets the stage for a unique credibility and the power of Coach Jim Johnson's message. Many speakers talk about leadership, but it's rare to find a speaker who has quite literally led thousands. In a moment later, celebrated all over the world, Coach weighed risk with the potential for a great opportunity for an autistic student manager, Jason McElwain, JMac, catapulting Jim, the team, and JMac down a path of inspiration and hope. That one victory continues to reverberate into countless lives as audience after audience is touched by a wave of courage and tenacity and witnesses what true leadership can accomplish. Congrats on creating such an inspiring moment, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thanks, Karl. Looking forward to talking to you.
Yeah, you're definitely one of them. I come from a different perspective on the leadership thing, but I think it's kind of what the kind of C-suite needs to hear, and the lessons they can learn are really applicable, because it also just, it's amazing when they reached out to me, because they're like, oh, the internet's leaking. I'm actually talking to this guy, because I've seen the clip. Probably anyone who's watching the show might have heard the clip of and seen the clip of the kid, J-Mac, who had been supporting the team as a manager for so long, get out and actually do really well on the court in the last game of the season is super inspirational. And I think it's the approach to leadership you showed there and what you've gone on to talk about is stuff that, while it seems like it has nothing to do with quote unquote business, it's actually what is really missing from the business world, that it can be the solution for a lot of the problems currently plaguing a lot of teams and leaders. So tell me more about the lessons you've learned and that you communicate with people based on that experience.
Well, I have been blessed to speak to a lot of groups, including a number of businesses. And what I've learned is a lot of leadership skills, whether it's leading a basketball team or leading a team in a business, is there's a lot of transferable skills. And you mentioned, and that's why I admire your podcast, is I'm truly right with you, the human connection. In fact, I spoke to a group of educators last year at a conference, and I kidded them that the 3 R's in leadership and education is not reading, arithmetic, and writing. It's relationships. And so the ability to build relationships, I think, is really essential. In Jason's story, what I really like to share with people is 2 things. One is that he deserved an opportunity because he was willing to serve our program any way he could. And he was always willing to put in the work in the unseen hours, helping our team and also helping himself by trying to be the best he could be. And the other thing is giving people a chance, whether it's business or in my case in a basketball game, but make sure that that person is doing the work so they can, what we call carpe diem, seize the day. And certainly Jason did seize the day by having that magical 4 minutes where he scored 20 points, including 6 3-pointers.
Yeah, I think that lesson about making sure they're prepared or kind of investing in your people as a leader is something that not enough companies really do. They don't seem to, they might do a few things, kind of token like stipends for learning or like investing in like continuing education stuff, but they don't really have kind of active mentorship programs. They don't really, especially the C-suite doesn't often seem to really like invest a lot of their time in mentoring their like direct reports or other team members. And so there's a real shortcoming that they set themselves up for, because if someone needs to step up to handle a unusual situation or an extreme opportunity, but you haven't been prepping them for those and preparing the skills to be able to step up and succeed, then you're going to miss that opportunity, or your company is going to suffer in the long run. And so it's not about the people being able to step up without having the leaders support them beforehand and lay the groundwork for that. So I think it's that mindset of, if I invest more into my people, then they'll be able to come better support the company. And I think a lot of the fear that the C-suite has, I think, is if we improve our people, invest in our people, they're going to take those skills and they're going to go somewhere else. But really, when people feel like they're getting that support and they're feeling like they're seen and cared for, but they're not going to want to leave. They want to stay there because they have this experience that bonds them to the company. And then when they are given the opportunity to succeed and do, then that whole experience again builds that relationship strong, and they're just not going to leave that for a slightly higher salary offer.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I always kid leaders that what would you rather have? People that you train and support and they continue to grow. And most of the time, I agree with you, they stay at their company, but sometimes they will leave. Or would you not train them, not support them, and then they stay? Because now you're getting people that are not very competent, and I always talk to leaders that I wrote a blog with the 8 C's, but 2 of the major C's in leadership is character and competence. And one of the things I encourage leaders, and one thing I learned when I started being a head coach in basketball, my competence initially I thought was learning the game of basketball, and that's part of it. But really, when I became a much better leader and coach is when I started to study leadership and really started to become a better leader. So I built a better team culture.
Yeah, I think that is, like, again, the culture word there is something that doesn't really seem to be understood by businesses. And I think that it's, if you're going to put it in a business plan, here's what our, like, the culture is, what we are, the values, and it kind of, if it just stays on a poster in the break room or it stays in the business plan, but isn't actually practiced, then it's not really your culture. It's kind of just lip service to the culture. And so I think that, and when you look at a sports team, like a basketball team, it's evident that if there's a culture, it shows up on the court and you can see what the actual results are, versus the business they don't seem to be quite as able to make that connection between the fact that their lack of culture, or their culture that is actually more like negative, or they're demonstrating the wrong behaviors or kind of toxic behaviors that end up hurting performance. There's not as much of that. It seems like direct one-to-one comparison of, our culture is bad, so our team performance is bad, so our business performance is bad. On a sporting situation, that is somewhat obvious to see. Okay, the people aren't playing well together, the team members aren't getting along, so the performance on the court doesn't work. But it's like in the office, it's the same thing, just different scenario, and they don't seem to make that connection.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think businesses, when I talk to them, like in sports, it's pretty easy because in a lot of team sports, you have a scoreboard. So that's very measurable. But I encourage businesses, you got to have your scoreboard. People got to know what winning and success looks like.
Yeah, I think it's also there's so many businesses, especially as they scale and there's more departments and things getting more and more siloed, there's delegated there. It's harder to track what success is like. And often if the different departments have different measurements for success and they're doing what they think is winning, but then it's not actually contributing towards what the company needs to win. And so it's like if your defense and your offense are doing 2 different things and not contributing to the same goal, then you're obviously not going to win as many games. But it's again, for the business world, what seems so obvious on the field seems to get obfuscated in a boardroom or in the office. And so it's actually, I've had someone on the show a while ago talking about that, just having one metric for success for all the departments, and then it's broken down in sub metrics, but all has that overall we're all pointing in the same direction,
Right.
focus that you need for any team to succeed, but it's not given the weight in the office setting as it does on the court.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's why, you got to have clarity of what the overall mission is. What is your North Star? And everybody should know that. And I always remind leaders that I believe effective leaders are the CROs, the chief reminding officers. They're living the mission, they're living the values, they're sharing, and they're models of what the behaviors of the core values are, because those are all essential, because culture is built day in and day out. And, you can put up a great mission statement, you can put up core values, but if you're not as a leader living them, and then everybody understand what they are, and making sure that you're holding people accountable by praising them when they're doing well and correcting them when they're not. That's essential as a leader.
So what's kind of a successful you've had since the court and of helping businesses apply this to their teams and stuff, and what's been some of the outcomes you've enjoyed seeing your clients get from your coaching?
Well, I've talked to various businesses, and, I have two presentations I usually do for them. One is how to build a championship team culture, and another one is how to be an effective leader and teaching them leader. But one of the things that I've gotten some really good feedback is that, I always ask them, is trust important in building a great culture? And everybody agrees it is. But then I really throw them a curveball, and this is something that helped our program immensely in turning programs around in the positive, is that we built an intentional trust plan, and we have 3 keys to building our trust plan. And what I share that with them, but I also talk to them that you have to have clarity of how you're going to build trust day in and day out, because you can't run an effective team, whether it's a business, a sport, or anything, if there's not trust amongst everybody.
Yeah, there's definitely a huge lack of trust between employees and their executive teams, and between just a lot of people in society. And so what are the steps of that trust program, and what's kind of the first step in building that when you're working as an executive and trying to get people in line with the vision and the culture you have for your company?
So we had a 3-point plan. This is what we did, and this is what I taught my leaders in my program and the coach the other teams. Is number one is we had to consistently align our words and actions. So, for example, if we practice at 6:00 in the morning, as the leader, I better be there early, because being on time was one of our core values, and therefore you got to model what you expect. So that would be aligning your words and action. A more significant one is my last 23 years, I decided I got challenged by a mentor to be a better role model. So I told all my parents and players at our first meeting after the teams were chosen that I was not going to drink alcohol during the season. Now, there's a choice I made, and I didn't have to do that. But here's the key, is how about if I shared that to everybody, and then 2 weeks later, I got a DWI? What do you think that would have done to the trust? And do we see that with leaders? We see it all the time. We just had not that long ago where a leader was caught on camera at a concert with having an affair. Those are things that, you're not aligning your words and actions. Now, fortunately, I didn't make that choice, but we see that all the time where leaders, say one thing and do another. The second one is, I think, is an art and science one, and that is the ability to tell each other the truth. As the Bible says, the truth will set you free. But why I say it's an art and science, because getting to know your people and building relationships, there were some players that I could call them out in the middle of practice and criticize them, and it was a great lesson for the whole team. There are others that could not handle it, and that's why building relationships and getting to know your people. And so I would do that one-on-one, but I would still correct their behavior, and that's why, to me, telling the truth is an art and science. And then the third one, we took over programs that had been bad. So when you take over something that's negative, usually the self-esteem of the people isn't real positive. So one of the things we really focus is on catching people doing right with specific praise. So instead of saying, nice job, Johnny, or nice job, Susie, in basketball terms, we'd say, hey, Johnny, that was awesome how you dove on the floor for that loose ball. That's what championship players do on championship teams. So when they have clarity of what praise and what you're expecting, then you're going to get that repeated. And that's what praise does. So being specifically to praise and catching people doing right is one of the things that really build trust.
Yeah, I like that. There's three behaviors that, again, as you mentioned, have to be modeled by the executives, so the team leaders. And when they do that, and it does take time, but it's about putting that first foot forward and modeling it themselves, and setting that standard for telling the truth and holding yourself accountable, and walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And then that specific praise, I think, are three great habits that leaders need to have in order to be successful. And it's stuff that it's funny how the number of guests I've had that talk about kind of similar advice from different perspectives, from different backgrounds, but it really is, this isn't just like a leadership tool. This is a human relationship tool. And it's something that when you're out there and in an office situation or in a team situation, because you're dealing with people, that it works in either circumstance, or if you're out just in the world talking with people, the way you show up and start by holding yourself accountable, and then showing that you really see what people are doing around you, and either telling them what they need to hear in the situation they need to hear it to improve their behavior, but then also how to praise them in a way that shows it's not just a platitude, it's a real recognition, is super important. And I don't think it's one of those things, I think, as the pace of business has sped up, that's one of the things that people don't think they have time to do. But it's some of those little small things that with a few seconds each time, like, to actually do these things properly. It doesn't take a lot of time to do it, but it's when it's done consistently and it's made a habit, it has a huge impact on the business.
It sure does. I always talk, and I think the other side, catching people right, but is also when you're correcting people, you have certain standards. Like one of ours, for example, is you had to be on time. And I'll tell you a quick story. We had one of our best players come in during our postseason tournament. We had to shoot free throws in the morning. That was part of our routine. And if you were a starter and you came late, you did not start that night. And he was our best player. He came late. And most of our team well, can we change the rule? I said, nope, that's our standard. And he did not start that night. And, it was a great lesson for all of them. But unfortunately, the team rallied around each other and we won the game, even though he didn't start. So those are things that are, I think, really important as a leader, that if you have certain standards, you got to hold those standards, both good and when the bad happens.
Yeah, there's definitely a lack of accountability in the world, but I think it's something that has to start with leaders that actually want to lead teams to success, and because it's something that, if the leader isn't holding people accountable, then they're setting that behavior, but when you do it and you stick to the rules and you enforce them and actually demonstrate that there's something that's more important than just like the bottom line, and you can still achieve that bottom line you're looking for, but it's done in a way that brings people together instead of eroding the trust. Because maybe, you got to that bottom line by breaking the rules, but then you've sacrificed the trust, and it's not sustainable, because gestures to state of the world. So if you're able to, or when you hold yourself accountable, hold the team accountable, and if you don't quite make the goal, but you got close, that can be, in a business sense, it can probably still be fine. But it's like, if you then achieve the goal despite it, that's even more rewarding and more fulfilling. It's just a matter of having more, valuing something beyond just that bottom line, because I think that there's just more to life than just the success for success's sake.
Yeah, well said. I think that's why I always encourage people with a mission. It's got to be bigger than winning basketball games or making a profit. It's got to be something that you're making a significant impact that's bigger than you. And when you do that, I think it's really powerful. And the other thing, Carl, I always like to share with leaders is because you hear in music the one hit wonder. Often in sports you'll see a team win a championship and the next year where are they? And so what I really, because we had a lot of success and we became very consistent, and the two things I really learned is that once you make your goals for that season, now the next season, how do you maintain that? And the two things I encourage: number one, as a leader, you got to keep growing, and number two is you got to keep growing your people, because if you stand still, people are going to go right by you. So that focus on personal and team growth is so hugely important if you want to continue to have consistency in the level you want to, not just 1 year, but multiple years.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Jim. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection Podcast, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. If you want to learn more about myself and Jim, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.